My name is Samira, and I am 12 years old from Taif, Saudi Arabia. I want you to prepare your heart before hearing this story, because what happened to me was so unexpected, so bright, and so powerful that even now it feels as if it happened only yesterday. Where I come from, people do not speak of miracles. We do not talk about anything outside the strict traditions we were taught. And no one, absolutely no one, ever dares to mention the name of Jesus. But what I saw that night was so real, so peaceful, and so full of life that I cannot forget it, no matter how dangerous it is for me and my family today. At this early age of mine, I grew up believing the same things every Muslim child around me believed, learning the Quran in school, respecting the words of our imam, and listening to my parents teach me that Islam was the only path we were meant to follow. My father, Mahmoud al-Sayed, works as a mechanic in one of the old garages near Al-Hada Road, and my mother, Fatima, stays home caring for me and my younger brother. Nothing about my childhood felt unusual or special. To everyone, I was just another Muslim girl in Taif, living the same simple routines, walking the same dusty pathways, playing with the same neighborhood children, and hearing the same phrases. Trust Allah, obey your parents, stay away from strange ideas. But even though life looked ordinary, something inside me always felt like it was waiting for something I didn't understand, like a quiet space in my heart was waiting for a voice I had never heard before. As a child in our neighborhood, most of my days were quiet. I helped my mother wash dishes, sweep the small courtyard, and fold laundry that smelled of detergent and desert air. I attended school with girls my age, learning Arabic grammar, Islamic history, and mathematics. We memorized verses, we stood in lines, and we all repeated the same teachings. My father always reminded me to behave well so people wouldn't talk, because in places like ours, reputation is important, and every small mistake becomes a discussion among neighbors. We lived in a small but peaceful home, with cream-colored walls and a small palm tree standing stubbornly in the corner of our yard. On Friday mornings, we heard the men rushing to the mosque, and the sound of their footsteps always signaled that our lives were tied to tradition, expectation, and a culture where no one dared ask questions outside what the imam taught. But for the most part, I was happy. I loved my family, I loved my routines, and nothing in me ever imagined that my life would change in a way that would shake everything around me. Everyone in our neighborhood adored an elderly woman named Ahmed, who lived 2 houses away. She was old, gentle, and always smiling despite the struggles she carried quietly. She used to sit outside her home, greeting children as we passed by, giving us dates or small sweets when she had them. She became like a grandmother figure to many children, including me, and I always felt safe sitting beside her while she told stories of Taif from many years ago. But months before everything changed, she became very sick. The sickness came slowly at first, tiredness, short breaths, trembling hands. But soon it became something no one could ignore. My mother visited her often, taking soup or tea to her house. The women whispered that Allah was testing her. Men discussed her condition after prayers. The imam came several times to recite verses for her, but nothing changed. She became weaker with every passing week, until she could barely lift her head from her pillow. The whole neighborhood seemed to prepare itself for her death. Even I felt a heaviness whenever I thought of her. She had been sick for almost 7 months, and everyone knew it was only getting worse. Before the night that changed everything, I never questioned what I believed. I followed the traditions I was taught. I prayed as every Muslim girl prayed. I memorized the right words and repeated the right answers. But my heart was always quiet. I didn't feel anything special when I prayed. It felt like a routine, like something I did because everyone else did it. Still, I never imagined anything different. But one night, something happened that I still struggle to explain. It was just after midnight. The house was silent, and even the wind outside seemed to stop moving. I had fallen asleep early, exhausted from helping my mother throughout the day. But suddenly I woke up without knowing why. When I opened my eyes, my entire room felt strange, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Then, without warning, a light appeared. Not like the light from a lamp or the moon or the street outside. This light felt alive, warm, soft, yet too bright to look at directly. My heart began racing, and for a moment I couldn't move. The light grew stronger, but it wasn't frightening. It felt like something peaceful was filling the room, pushing out every worry, every fear, every thought I ever had. And then I saw him. I didn't know who he was at first. I had never seen anything like this in my entire life. The figure stood in the center of my room, surrounded by a brightness that didn't hurt my eyes, a brightness that felt gentle and comforting. His face was full of so much peace that my small heart didn't know how to hold it. I wanted to cry, but not out of fear, out of something I didn't understand. He didn't speak with his mouth. The words came into my heart like soft whispers carried by wind. He showed me images I didn't understand at first. People being healed, hands being lifted, joy spreading in places full of pain. Then I saw myself, kneeling beside Ahmed, placing my hands gently on her as she rose from her sickbed. The images shocked me. I was only a child. I couldn't heal anyone. But the voice inside the light told me that healing didn't come from me. It came from him. And somehow, even though I had never heard his name before, my heart whispered it on its own, Jesus. When the dream or vision, or whatever it was, faded, I woke up sitting upright in my bed, shaking so hard that my teeth were almost chattering. The room was dark again, the light gone, but the warmth remained inside me, like someone had touched my heart and left something glowing there. I felt tears on my cheeks. My breath came fast and shallow. I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know whether to scream, run, or fall back to sleep. Instead, I ran straight to my parents' room. My father woke up immediately when he saw me crying, thinking I had a nightmare. My mother held my shoulders and asked what happened. I told them everything: the light, the figure, the images, the voice, the name that entered my chest like it belonged there. For a long moment, neither of my parents spoke. My father stared at me as if I had said something dangerous. My mother kept glancing at the door, as though someone might be listening. Then my father grabbed my wrist so tightly it almost hurt. His voice shook as he told me never to repeat what I had just said. He said dreams can confuse people. He said children imagine things. But his eyes didn't match his words. His eyes were full of fear, a fear deeper than anything I had ever seen in him. He told me that mentioning Jesus in a Muslim household could cause trouble. He said people in the neighborhood would misunderstand. He said no one should hear such things from a child. My mother nodded quickly and told me to forget everything, to act as if nothing happened. They made me promise not to tell anyone. But how could I forget something that felt more real than anything in my life? How could I pretend I didn't feel that warmth deep inside me? That night, after my parents tried to calm me and sent me back to bed, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, knowing something in me had changed forever. In the days that followed, life looked the same on the outside. I still helped my mother. I still went to school. I still recited the same Islamic verses. But inside me, nothing was the same anymore. The light from that night stayed with me. It felt like someone had placed a small candle deep in my heart, and no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, it kept shining. I thought of Ahmed every day. Her tired face appeared in my mind whenever I tried to do chores. The images from the dream kept replaying, my small hands touching hers, her weak body rising with strength. I didn't understand why Jesus showed me that. I didn't understand why a girl like me, in a place where no one speaks his name, would experience something so impossible. But I knew one thing. What I saw was real, and pretending it wasn't wouldn't make it disappear. My father pretended nothing happened, but he watched me closely. My mother avoided talking about it. It was as if the whole house was holding a secret too heavy for anyone to carry, and yet the weight of it rested quietly on my small heart. Deep inside, I knew something was coming. I didn't know what or when, but I felt it every time I breathed. The night of the vision opened a door I didn't ask for, and I could feel that my life was no longer moving in the same direction as before. Something unseen had stepped into my world, and no amount of silence or warnings could change that. And though I didn't yet understand the meaning of what I saw, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The God who found me in my small room in Taif was not finished with me yet. The days after the vision felt heavier, as if the air around me carried something I could not see, but could feel pressing gently on my heart. I tried to continue my life as before, helping my mother, completing my schoolwork, and pretending nothing unusual had happened. But the warmth from that night never left me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the bright figure again, the peaceful face, the images of healing, and most of all, Ahmed lying helpless on her bed. The dream replayed so clearly in my mind that it felt more like a memory than imagination. My parents expected me to forget it, but forgetting something that changed my heart felt impossible. Instead, the feeling inside me grew stronger. It pulled at me softly, almost like a whisper reminding me that the vision wasn't meant to be ignored. I felt something urging me to move, something telling me that what I saw was not just a dream, but an invitation to step into something unknown. On the third morning after the vision, I woke up unusually alert, as if someone had called my name before I opened my eyes. The sun had barely risen, and the house was still quiet. My mother was preparing tea in the kitchen, and my father had already left for the garage. I washed my face and tried to distract myself by helping with the morning chores, but the feeling inside me kept growing stronger. Every time I tried to focus on sweeping the courtyard or folding laundry, my thoughts slipped back to Ahmed. Her tired eyes, her weak breathing, her trembling hands. All of it pressed heavily on my heart. I remembered the way she smiled at me even when she had no strength left. I remembered sitting beside her as a child, listening to her gentle stories about life before Taif became crowded with buildings and shops. The thought of her suffering felt unbearable, but now there was something else, a quiet certainty that I was meant to do something for her. I didn't know how. I didn't know why. But the images from the dream made my heart beat faster every time I thought of her lying sick in her home. By midday, my mother asked me to take some leftover soup to Ahmed's house, something she usually did herself. I don't know if she noticed how restless I was, or if it was simply a coincidence. But the moment she handed me the small container wrapped in a cloth, a strange calm washed over me. It was as if everything inside me suddenly aligned with a purpose I didn't fully understand. I took the soup and stepped into the street, feeling the afternoon heat warm my face. As I walked, my legs shook slightly, not from fear but from something new, a strange mixture of courage and uncertainty. The street was quiet, with only a few neighbors sitting outside their homes. No one paid much attention to me. When I reached Ahmed's door, I paused, feeling my heart pound hard against my chest. The courtyard looked the same as always, with its narrow walkway and small bench where she used to sit. But now it felt different, as if it was waiting for something to happen. I knocked softly, and after a moment, Ahmed's daughter-in-law, a woman named Layla, opened the door. Her face looked tired, the kind of tiredness that comes from watching someone you love suffer for too long. She gave me a weak smile when she saw the soup in my hands, but her eyes were filled with sadness. She thanked me and let me step inside. The air in the house felt heavy and warm, and I could hear the faint sound of Ahmed's breathing from the small room where she lay. As I walked in, my hands trembled slightly. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know how to pray like in the dream. I didn't even know if I should. But the moment I saw Ahmed lying there, pale and still, something inside me broke. Not in a painful way, but in a way that pushed me toward her without thinking. Her eyes were closed, and her breaths were shallow. It looked like she was floating between sleep and weakness, barely aware of the world around her. I sat beside her quietly, not wanting to disturb her. For a moment, I simply watched her chest rise and fall. I remembered the warmth from the dream, the light, the gentle voice that touched my heart. My fingers tingled slightly, as if something inside me wanted to move before I allowed it to. Without fully understanding what I was doing, I reached out and took her hand. Her skin was cool and fragile. My heart was pounding so hard I thought Layla might hear it. I closed my eyes, trying to recall the words from my dream, but no exact words came. Instead, a whisper rose inside my chest, gentle and soft, guiding me to say something simple. I took a slow breath and spoke barely above a whisper. "In the name of Jesus, please heal her." That was all. No long prayer. No repeated phrases. Just a small request, spoken with the deepest sincerity my 10-year-old heart could offer. I opened my eyes, not expecting anything to happen immediately. But before I could move my hand away, Ahmed's fingers twitched. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but then her eyelids fluttered. She took a deeper breath, deeper than any breath I had heard from her in months. Her chest rose more evenly, and her pale cheeks warmed with a hint of color. My eyes widened. I leaned back slightly, unsure if I should call for Layla. But before I could speak, Ahmed's eyes opened fully, and she looked straight at me. There was no confusion in her gaze, no tiredness, only clarity and strength. She tried to sit up, something she had not been able to do for months. Instinctively, I placed my hands behind her back to help her rise, my heart trembling with disbelief. Her breathing sounded normal. Her hands felt warm. She looked stronger with every passing second. When Layla walked into the room and saw her mother-in-law sitting upright, her mouth fell open in shock. She nearly dropped the spoon she carried. "Alhamdulillah," she shouted automatically, but her voice shook with confusion. She rushed forward, touching Ahmed's face, her shoulders, her arms, as if checking whether this was truly happening. Tears filled her eyes as she cried out for her husband. The sound of her shouting echoed through the house. Doors opened. Footsteps rushed toward us. People from the neighboring homes began to gather outside the open doorway, drawn by the sudden noise. I stood frozen beside the bed, unsure of what I should do or whether I should run home. My hands shook as the room filled with voices and gasps. Within minutes, the small room was crowded. The men who gathered stared at Ahmed as if they were witnessing something impossible. They all knew how sick she had been. They had watched her decline for months. Some had already whispered that she would not survive another week. But now she was sitting, smiling even, asking for water in a clear, strong voice. One of the older men stepped closer, his eyebrows raised in disbelief. "How is this possible?" he muttered. Another man whispered, "Allah has shown mercy." But Layla, still overwhelmed, pointed at me with trembling hands. Samira, she prayed for her," she said breathlessly. The entire room turned to look at me. My heart sank into my stomach. I felt exposed, as if every secret inside me had just been placed in the middle of the floor for everyone to examine. The murmurs intensified. Women covered their mouths in shock. Men exchanged puzzled glances. I wanted to disappear. Their eyes felt heavy on me, full of confusion and questions I didn't know how to answer. "What did you say to her?" one of the men asked. "How did this happen?" another demanded. I shook my head, unable to speak. The warmth inside my heart was still there, but now it mixed with fear. I had not expected anyone to notice. I had not planned for people to react like this. I didn't even understand what had happened myself. All I knew was that I had whispered a small prayer, and something beyond me had responded. The room grew louder as people tried to make sense of the situation. Some said it was a miracle from Allah. Others whispered that something strange had entered the neighborhood. As more neighbors crowded into the courtyard, the confusion grew. People asked Layla to repeat what she had seen. Some looked at me with awe, others with uncertainty. A few older women touched my shoulders gently, as if hoping to feel something unusual. I felt overwhelmed, too small to handle all the attention. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to be questioned. I only wanted to run back home and hide. The pressure around me felt like a storm forming in the air. Too many eyes, too many whispers, too many emotions I was not prepared for. But before I could move, Ahmed reached for my hand. Her grip was firm and steady. She pulled me closer and whispered, "Bless you, my child." Her words were gentle, but they moved through me like a wave, comforting and terrifying all at once. Word of the miracle spread faster than I could have imagined. By late afternoon, almost everyone in the neighborhood knew what had happened. Women gathered outside their doors, talking in hushed voices. Men walked in groups, exchanging theories about how such a thing could occur. Some said Allah had answered the prayers of a child. Others said the sickness may never have been serious. A few even suggested that the old woman had been pretending all along, although no one truly believed that. But in every conversation, my name came up. Samira did it, they said. Samira prayed. Samira was seen holding her hand. My heart felt heavy when I walked back home. The sunlight seemed too bright, the air too warm, and every step felt like the beginning of something I couldn't undo. When I reached home, my mother was waiting at the door. Her face was tense, her eyes filled with worry. "What did you do?" she whispered urgently, pulling me inside before anyone outside could see us talking. I told her everything, my voice shaking. I explained how I felt drawn to Ahmed, how I only whispered a small prayer, how she suddenly woke and regained strength. My mother listened in stunned silence. When I finished, she closed her eyes tightly and pressed her hand against her forehead. She didn't shout at me. She didn't blame me. But I saw fear settle into her expression. Deep, quiet fear that said she knew life had changed in a way none of us could control anymore. And as evening fell and the prayers from the mosque echoed across Taif, I realized that the simple moment inside Ahmed's small room would not be forgotten. Something powerful had begun, something that would sweep through the neighborhood like a wind no one was ready for. And I, a 12-year-old girl who barely understood what had happened, stood unknowingly at the center of it all. The hours after the miracle did not settle quietly the way my mother hoped they would. By the next morning, the whispers in the neighborhood had grown louder, traveling from door to door, from courtyard to courtyard, until even people who had never spoken to us before stood outside our gate looking for answers. I woke up early, hoping the world outside had calmed down, but instead I heard voices in the street. Women asking questions, men speaking in low tones, and children repeating things they did not understand. My father had already left for work when I stepped into the courtyard, but my mother stood near the entrance with worry written across her face. She kept looking at our door as if she expected someone to knock at any moment. I felt the weight of her fear even before anyone approached. But by mid-morning, the knocking began. At first, it was a single woman with a child leaning weakly on her shoulder. Then a small group of men stood outside, asking softly if they could talk to my father. Later in the evening, after most of the crowd had gone home with promises to return the next day, my father sat on the floor in the main room with his head in his hands. My mother sat beside him, her hands trembling as she recounted each moment of the day. I sat quietly near the doorway, feeling small and uncertain. My father lifted his head slowly and stared at me, not with anger, but with confusion mixed with fear. "Samira," he said softly, "people are talking. They are saying things that could cause us serious trouble. They will go to the imam. They will ask questions we cannot answer." His words made my stomach twist. I knew the imam of our neighborhood, Imam Khalid al-Matari, a strict but respected man who often warned people about staying away from anything that strayed from Islamic teachings. My father continued, "If he hears these stories, he will come here. He will want to know what you said, what you did, why people believe you were involved." The thought of the imam coming to our home made my heart beat faster. I imagined him standing in our courtyard with his stern expression, questioning my parents, questioning me. My father went on, "People will misunderstand, Samira. They will think we are doing something forbidden. They will think we are abandoning Islam." My mother wiped tears from her cheeks. "We must be careful," she whispered. "This cannot continue. Not like this." But even as they spoke, I felt that familiar warmth in my chest again, reminding me of the light in my dream and the gentle voice that guided me. I didn't know how to explain it to my parents without scaring them more. I didn't know how to say that this wasn't something I could control or stop, that the healings were not my doing. They were something greater, something I was only witnessing and participating in without fully understanding. That night, before we went to sleep, my father stepped outside to check the street. When he returned, his face looked pale. He said a group of men had been standing near the corner, whispering among themselves and pointing toward our house. Some of them had come from the mosque earlier, likely sent by the imam to observe the situation. My father locked the door tightly and told us not to speak to anyone about what happened, not even our relatives. The room fell silent after that. I lay awake long after everyone else slept, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sounds of people still gathered outside, talking quietly in the night. I felt fear, but I also felt something stronger, an unshakable sense that the story had only begun, and that the warmth inside my heart was preparing me for something far bigger than anything I had seen so far. That night felt longer than any night I had ever lived through. Even after the crowds disappeared and the street quieted, the tension in our home did not melt away. My father paced across the small living room with slow, heavy steps, pausing every few minutes to look through the cracks in the window shutters, as if expecting someone to appear. My mother sat on the floor with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, whispering prayers under her breath, asking Allah to protect our family from whatever trouble had begun forming around us. I sat quietly in the corner, unsure of what to feel. Part of me still burned with the warmth from the healings, but another part felt afraid because I could see fear in my father's eyes, a fear I had never seen before. Something in the air felt fragile, as if one wrong word could break everything we knew. As the night grew deeper, my father finally stopped pacing and sat down heavily beside my mother. He rubbed his face with both hands, letting out a long breath that sounded like he had been holding it for hours. "This cannot continue," he murmured, though his voice lacked the confidence that usually filled his words. My mother nodded silently, her eyes shining with worry as she looked at me. My father was a man who knew the rules of our culture well. He understood how quickly a village, or even a single street, could turn on a family if they were seen as stepping outside the expectations of Islam. And now, stories of miracles connected to the name of Jesus were spreading fast. "People will talk to the imam," my father said softly, "and if he believes something strange is happening here, he will not ignore it. They will start asking questions no father wants to answer." His words made me shiver. I remembered Imam Khalid's strict face, the way he spoke about protecting the purity of faith, and the fear he inspired in many adults. I knew this situation could become dangerous in ways I didn't understand. After several long minutes of silence, my father suddenly stood up again. But this time, there was something different in his posture. Not anger, not panic, but determination mixed with uncertainty. He looked at my mother and said quietly, "There is someone I need to find." My mother blinked, confused. "At this hour?" she whispered. My father nodded slowly. He hesitated for a moment before explaining further, as if choosing his words carefully. "Months ago," he said, "I met a man near the old road toward Al-Shafa. He wasn't Saudi. He was helping with a broken cart. He spoke kindly, too kindly." My mother frowned, not understanding. My father continued. "He said he was a Christian, a believer in Jesus." My chest tightened when I heard that. My father never spoke about meeting Christians. Most Saudis rarely interacted with them at all. My mother's eyes widened in disbelief. "Mahmoud," she whispered, "you must not speak of such things." But my father shook his head, his expression showing he had already made up his mind. "I didn't think much of him then," he said softly. "But now, after everything that happened, I need answers." My mother grabbed his wrist in fear. "You cannot go to him. If anyone sees you—" "I will be careful," he whispered, cutting her off gently. "But I cannot stay here doing nothing. I must understand what is happening to our daughter." His voice cracked slightly on the last words, revealing the weight he was carrying. He glanced at me, confusion, love, fear, all tangled in his expression. Then, without another word, he wrapped a scarf around his head, slipped quietly out of the house, and closed the door behind him. The silence that followed felt heavier than the darkness outside. My mother blew out the small lamp and pulled me close as we waited in the dimness, listening for any sound that might signal danger in the street. The minutes passed slowly, stretching into what felt like hours. My mother whispered prayers almost constantly, asking Allah to protect my father in the night. I leaned against her, listening to her heartbeat, feeling her hand tremble slightly each time a distant dog barked or the wind rustled through the narrow alley. I didn't know where my father had gone exactly, only that the road toward Al-Shafa was dark and empty at that hour. My thoughts drifted to the figure in my dream, the light that had filled my room, the gentle voice that spoke without sound. I wondered if my father would believe me more after speaking with the Christian man, or if it would only confuse him further. The quiet around us felt tense, as if the whole world was waiting for something. My mother checked the window repeatedly, her breath catching lightly each time she thought she heard footsteps. But no one came. Near midnight, the front door opened softly. My father stepped inside and quickly shut it behind him. His face looked different, tired but not frightened. Instead, there was a calmness in his eyes that I had not seen since the miracle first happened. He motioned for us to sit close and spoke in a low voice so the neighbors wouldn't hear. "I found him," my father said quietly. "The Christian man is staying in an abandoned building near the lower road." He remembered me. My mother clutched her chest, shocked that my father had taken such a risk. "What did he say? Did you tell him everything?" she whispered. My father nodded slowly. "I told him about Samira, about the dream, about the healings, about the people coming to our home." As he spoke, my heart began to beat faster. My mother asked, "And what did he say?" My father hesitated for a brief moment, as if replaying the conversation in his mind, then answered softly. "He said he is not surprised." My mother gasped quietly, covering her mouth. My father continued, his voice steady but filled with disbelief. "He told me that in many places where people cannot hear the message of Jesus openly, Jesus appears to them in dreams. He said it happens more often than we think." The room felt suddenly smaller, the air thick with emotions I couldn't name. "He said your dream, Samira," my father continued, looking at me, "is something he has heard about before." My mother shook her head slowly, struggling to understand. My father lowered his voice even more. He explained that Jesus often reveals himself to those who are not searching directly, especially in lands where his name brings danger. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Mahmoud, this is dangerous to even talk about," she whispered. My father nodded. "I know, but the man spoke with such calm, such certainty. I couldn't deny it." Then he said the part that surprised me most. "He is waiting outside." Before my mother could protest, my father stood and unlocked the door again. A tall man stepped inside quietly, dressed in simple clothes dusty from travel, his expression gentle and peaceful. He closed the door softly behind him, as if careful not to disturb the night or attract attention. His eyes scanned the room briefly before settling on me. I expected fear or awkwardness in his face, but instead, he looked at me with a softness that made me feel seen in a way I had never felt before. My mother stiffened, unsure whether to greet him or hide. My father motioned for us to sit, and the man lowered himself onto the floor with us. His voice, when he finally spoke, was calm and warm. "Peace to this home," he said softly. No one in our family knew how to respond to such a greeting, but none of us felt insulted or threatened by it. Instead, something about it eased the tension in the room. My father told him again what had happened, this time with more detail, describing the dream, the figure of light, the warmth, the whisper of the name Jesus, and the healings that followed. The man listened without interrupting, nodding slowly as if each word confirmed something he already believed. When my father finished, the man closed his eyes briefly, whispering something quietly under his breath. Then he opened them and spoke in gentle tones. "Samira," he said, "what you saw was not a dream of confusion. It was a visit of truth." My heart fluttered at his words. My mother held her breath. "Jesus has always revealed himself to the humble, to those whose hearts are open," the man continued, "especially to children. In your land, his name brings fear, so he comes in ways that cannot be stopped or silenced, through dreams, through visions, through quiet miracles." His words felt like soft rain falling on dry ground. My mother looked at him with wide, uncertain eyes. "But why her?" she asked softly, her voice trembling with emotion. The man smiled gently. "Because God sees her. Even in the places where his name is forbidden, his love is not." My father stared at the floor, processing each word slowly. The man continued. "What happened to the woman? What happened to the others? Those were signs. Not of Samira's strength, but of Jesus working through her." I felt a strange mixture of fear and comfort wash over me. It was overwhelming to hear someone speak about my dream with such confidence. My father lifted his eyes and asked hesitantly, "What do we do? People are talking. The imam may come soon. We are afraid." The man's expression grew serious. "Fear is natural," he said gently, "but you must understand something important. When Jesus begins a work, darkness pushes back. That is why danger feels close." His words sank deeply into the room, heavy but true. My mother's hands trembled as she listened. The man continued in a firm but peaceful tone. "You must be wise. You must be careful. But do not think this is something random or meaningless. Jesus came to Samira for a reason. I swallowed hard, unsure how to feel about being chosen for something so large and frightening. My father asked, "What reason?" The man exhaled slowly. "To reveal light in a place where people do not expect it." The room fell quiet. I felt warmth fill my heart again, spreading through my chest like a reminder of the dream. The man looked at me with a gentle smile. "Samira, you are not alone. Jesus is with you, and he will guide you." His words wrapped around me like a blanket, comforting and terrifying at the same time. Before leaving, the man placed a hand lightly on my father's shoulder. "Be watchful," he warned softly. "Many will come seeking truth, but others will come with threats. You must prepare yourselves." My father nodded slowly, his jaw tight with concern but his eyes steadier than before. The man stood, gave us one final nod, and slipped out into the darkness, disappearing into the night as quietly as he had arrived. My mother closed the door behind him and leaned against it, her breath shaky, but her eyes full of emotion. My father looked at me for a long moment, a mixture of fear and awe in his expression. Neither of them spoke. The room felt filled with something invisible, yet undeniable. And as the last echoes of the man's footsteps faded into the night, I realized something deep inside of me. The world I once knew had already changed forever, and nothing could undo the path that had begun in that dream of light. The days after the Christian man visited our home were filled with a tension that felt heavier than the desert heat. Even though he had spoken gently, his warning echoed constantly through my father's mind. I could see it in the way my father listened to every sound outside, the way he paused before opening the door, and the way he lowered his voice even when he spoke inside our own walls. The miracles that happened had brought hope to many people, but they had also awakened fear in others. People who once smiled at us now whispered quietly when we walked past. Men who used to greet my father warmly now watched him with suspicion. And each evening, as the call to prayer echoed through Taif, the air felt tighter, as if the whole neighborhood sensed something unusual was happening but didn't know how to understand it. Rumors spread faster than my father expected. Some people said Allah had gifted a child with healing. Others insisted something dangerous was happening in our home. A few women told my mother that the imam had asked questions about us after Friday prayers. He wanted to know why crowds had gathered at our door, why people spoke of miracles, and why the name of Jesus had been mentioned by several families. When my mother heard this, her face grew pale. She knew how dangerous such conversations could become. The imam was respected, but he was strict, and he believed strongly in protecting the purity of Islam from anything that seemed foreign or forbidden. Once he grew suspicious, it would not take long before authorities or other religious leaders got involved. And in a place like Taif, accusations could spread very quickly, especially when tied to something people did not understand. One evening, my father came home earlier than usual, his face tight with worry. He told my mother that he had overheard two men from the mosque talking about us in harsh tones. They said our home had become a place of strange happenings, that the people visiting us were confused by the devil, and that the imam should investigate more closely. One man even suggested that my father was allowing foreign influence into the neighborhood. When my father shared these words, my mother covered her mouth to hide her gasp. She looked at me with eyes full of fear, as if she knew the situation was slipping out of our control. My father sat on the floor, his hands shaking slightly as he tried to steady his breathing. "They are watching us," he whispered. "They know something is happening here, and they will not stop until they understand what it is." The next day, the truth of his words became clear. As soon as the sun rose, my mother noticed two men standing near the end of our street. They pretended to talk casually, but their eyes stayed fixed on our house. When someone walked toward our door, the men stepped closer as if to discourage them from approaching. I peeked through the shutters and saw one of the men glance toward our windows, scanning the house carefully. My heart beat fast as I stepped back, afraid they had seen me. When my father returned home at noon for his break, he noticed the men immediately. He stepped inside quietly, closed the door, and leaned his forehead against it, his breath shallow. "It has begun," he murmured. My mother asked what he meant, but he shook his head, unable to explain everything. The look in his eyes said enough. By evening, more men appeared near the mosque. They stood in small groups, discussing something in low voices. When my father went to buy bread, one of the men stopped him and asked where the Christian man had gone. My father denied everything, but the man stared at him with suspicion, his eyes narrowing before he stepped aside. When my father returned home, he looked shaken. My mother immediately knew something serious had happened. "They know," he whispered. "Someone told them about the visitor." My stomach twisted. I imagined the Christian man walking alone in the dark, hiding among buildings to avoid being seen. I wondered if he was safe, or if he had already moved to another hiding place. The uncertainty made my chest tighten. That night, my father gathered us in the living room. The lamps were low, and the house felt strangely small, as if the walls themselves were afraid. He told us in a firm but trembling voice that things could not continue like this. "They will come," he said, "not to ask questions, to accuse. And once accusations begin, we will have no chance to explain." My mother held my brother close, tears filling her eyes. She asked my father what we should do. He hesitated for a long moment before saying words that changed everything. "We must leave Taif. Tonight." My heart dropped. I had never imagined leaving our home, our neighborhood, my school, or the familiar streets that had shaped my entire childhood. My mother stared at him in disbelief. "Where will we go?" she whispered. My father looked toward the window, then back at us. "To the safe house," he said softly. "The Christian man told me there is a place far outside the city where he takes people when danger comes." Once the decision was made, the room shifted into a quiet panic. My mother began gathering only the essentials, a few clothes, a small bag of bread, dates, and water. My father wrapped food in cloth and hid it under his jacket. He checked the windows repeatedly, making sure no one was watching. I helped quietly, folding my small belongings with shaking hands. I didn't know what to bring or what to leave behind. Every object in our home suddenly felt precious because I didn't know if I would ever see them again. My mother helped me choose a scarf that would cover my face if needed. My brother, too young to understand what was happening, clung to her leg, confused by the tension. As the night deepened, my father blew out the lights and motioned for us to move quietly. We slipped out through the back entrance of our house, passing through the small alley behind our courtyard. The sky was dark, and the moon hid behind thin clouds. The only sounds were the distant hum of the city and our soft footsteps on the dry ground. My father led the way, glancing over his shoulder every few seconds. My mother held my hand tightly, and I held her arm for support. The walk through the back streets of Taif felt endless. Every shadow looked like someone waiting. Every noise made us freeze. At one point, we heard men's voices near the main road, and my father pulled us behind a stack of crates until the voices faded. My heart pounded so loudly, I thought it would give us away. We moved through narrow passageways, past silent houses, and toward the edge of the city where fewer people lived. When we reached a deserted pathway leading toward the rocky outskirts, my father stopped. He turned to us and whispered, "We cannot walk on the roads. They may be watching." He guided us toward the uneven ground near the base of the hills. The path was rough, full of loose stones, and steep in some areas. My mother struggled to carry my brother, and I slipped several times, scraping my hands on sharp rocks. But we kept going, driven by fear and the knowledge that turning back was no longer an option. Each step took us farther from the life we knew and deeper into uncertainty. After nearly an hour of walking through the dark, we saw a dim light in the distance, a weak glow flickering near a small cluster of abandoned structures. My father motioned for us to stay low. As we approached, the Christian man emerged from behind one of the buildings. His face looked tired but relieved. "You came," he said softly. My father nodded quickly. The man ushered us inside a narrow doorway that led to a hidden room beneath the old building. The space was small, with rough walls, a thin mattress, and a few blankets. A lantern flickered in the corner, filling the room with warm but shaky light. "You will be safe here for now," the man said, closing the door behind us. Inside the safe house, the fear did not disappear completely, but the danger outside felt farther away. My mother sat on the floor, holding my brother tightly. My father whispered quietly with the Christian man, asking what would happen next. The man explained that this hiding place had sheltered several believers who had faced similar danger, though none as young as me. He told my father that we would need to stay hidden until things calmed down, and that he would bring food and news when it was safe. My father nodded, though I could tell he still felt uncertain. He wanted to protect us, but now we were depending on someone he barely knew, and yet trusted more than anyone at that moment. When my father finally sat beside us, he placed his arm around me and pulled me close. His voice was soft when he spoke. "Samira," he said, "we are here because of you. Not because you did something wrong, but because something powerful began in you." I looked down at my hands, still unsure how I, a 12-year-old girl, had become the center of such a storm. My father continued, "This is dangerous, but we will face it together." My mother wiped her tears and nodded in agreement. The Christian man whispered a prayer in his language, and even though I didn't understand the words, the room felt calmer after he spoke. As the lantern flickered, casting soft shadows on the walls, I realized that our lives had shifted in a way we could never reverse. We were far from our home, our neighbors, and everything familiar. But deep inside, the same warmth that had guided me since the night of the dream remained. It reminded me gently that we were not alone in that small hidden room. And even though danger surrounded us, something greater was moving ahead of us. Something that had begun in a quiet dream and had now led us into the unknown desert night. The first morning in the safe house felt different from anything I had ever experienced. When I woke up, the air was quiet. Too quiet compared to the sounds of Taif that usually filled my mornings. There were no calls of vendors, no voices of neighbors, no footsteps on the street. Only the muffled sound of wind brushing against the old walls and the soft breathing of my family around me. For a moment, I didn't remember where we were. Then, everything returned. The escape in the night, the men watching our home, the Christian man guiding us through darkness, and the fear that chased us until we reached the hidden place. My mother sat near the lantern, whispering prayers with tired eyes. My father slept leaning against the wall, exhaustion written across his face. I pulled the blanket around me and sat up slowly, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and peace. Even though we had left everything behind, the warmth inside my heart still remained, reminding me that the light from my dream had not abandoned us. As hours passed, we settled into a quiet routine inside the small hidden room. The Christian man returned a few times that week, bringing bread, water, and news from the city. Each time he arrived, my father met him at the doorway, whispering urgently about what was happening outside. The man told us that the rumors had spread farther than our neighborhood. People in other streets had started asking questions about the healings and the young girl connected to them. My name traveled faster than I could have imagined. Some people supposedly spoke with wonder, others with suspicion, and a few with anger. The imam had mentioned the situation during a gathering, warning the community to stay away from strange movements. I felt my stomach twist whenever I heard these updates. Part of me wished the miracles had never happened, that life had stayed quiet and ordinary. But another part of me knew that what happened was not a mistake. Something bigger had begun, something that could not be undone no matter how much fear surrounded it. In the safe house, time moved slowly. Days stretched long, and nights felt even longer. My mother cooked simple meals from the supplies given to us. My father spent most hours deep in thought, staring at the floor or whispering quietly with the Christian man. My younger brother played with small stones he found in the corner, unaware of the danger we were hiding from. I sat near the doorway many times, listening to the soft hum of the outside world. I thought often about the people who had been healed, the girl who stood on her own feet, the man who walked without pain, the woman who lifted her hands with strength she had not felt in years. I wondered how they were doing now, whether the joy they felt was still alive inside them, or whether fear had taken its place. The Christian man told us that some of them had quietly begun meeting in small groups, wanting to understand more about the name that brought healing. But these gatherings were risky, and many believers felt they had to hide their new faith to protect their families. One afternoon, the Christian man told us about a woman who had been deeply moved by what happened. She had begun reading anything she could find about Jesus, seeking answers in secret. Her husband, worried about what she was doing, warned her to be careful, but she refused to let fear choke the hope she had found. Another man, who had been healed from chest pain, had started praying quietly at night, asking Jesus to guide him even though he did not fully understand how to follow him. Hearing these stories made something inside me ache with both joy and sadness. Joy, because the miracles had touched people's hearts in ways I never expected. Sadness, because they were now living in the same danger we were facing. The Christian man reminded us that faith in places like ours often grew in silence and courage, hidden from the world but strong in the heart. During our days in hiding, my father and the Christian man had many long conversations. They spoke about faith, history, and the reasons Jesus appeared to people in dreams. Sometimes they sat for hours while my mother and I listened quietly. My father struggled to understand everything, but asked questions with deep sincerity. "Why would Jesus come to us?" he asked one evening, his voice soft. The Christian man answered gently, "Because he loves you, because he loves Samira, because he sees your hearts and he sees your land, and he knows the trouble you face. He comes where his name cannot be spoken openly." My father nodded slowly, his eyes softening with something that looked like acceptance. My mother wiped her eyes quietly, trying to understand the delicate balance between fear and truth that now filled our lives. I listened to everything, letting the words settle inside me like seeds finding soil. Even though we were safe inside the hidden room, fear sometimes crept into my heart. I worried about what would happen next. Would we ever return home? Would our neighbors forget the rumors? Would the imam continue looking for answers? These questions made my chest feel tight, but whenever fear rose too high, the memory of the dream returned. The bright light, the warmth, the voice that spoke without words. Those moments reminded me that we were not alone in the darkness. One night, I whispered to my mother that I was afraid of the future. She pulled me close and rested her cheek on my head. "I am afraid too," she admitted softly. "But fear cannot erase what we have seen. Something good began in you, and we cannot run from it forever." Her words gave me strength, even though neither of us knew what the coming days would bring. After nearly 2 weeks in hiding, the Christian man brought troubling news. He said that some men in the city had begun searching the outskirts, asking questions about families who had disappeared. They believed we had left because of guilt, and they wanted to bring us back for questioning. My father's face grew pale as he listened. "What should we do?" he asked in a trembling voice. The man placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "For now, stay hidden. There are believers watching the roads. They will warn us if danger comes close." My father nodded, but the fear in his eyes deepened. My mother clutched her hands tightly together, as if holding her fear inside. I sat quietly, feeling the weight of every word. The world outside felt like a storm we had barely escaped, and now the wind seemed to be circling back around us. As the days passed, I found myself thinking often about the Christians in other parts of the world. I imagined families who gathered openly without fear, churches where people sang loudly, and children who learned about Jesus without hiding in the shadows. I wondered what it felt like to live without worrying about who might knock on your door or what the imam might say. I had never known such freedom, but now, after everything I had seen, I began to dream of it. At night, I whispered small prayers. Not long or complicated, but simple ones asking Jesus to protect my family and the people who were quietly learning about him because of what had happened in Taif. Sometimes I wondered why Jesus had chosen me, a young girl with no special abilities, no knowledge of miracles, and no understanding of faith outside Islam. I didn't feel strong or wise. I felt small, fragile, and unsure of what lay ahead. But the Christian man reminded me that Jesus often used the smallest and simplest people to show his love. "He sees your heart," he told me once. "He knows your innocence. He works through you because you listen to him without fear." His words stayed in my heart, giving me courage even when everything else felt uncertain. I realized that following the path Jesus had opened for me didn't mean I understood everything. It only meant I trusted him, even when I couldn't see what was next. In those quiet days, I also learned to pray in my own way. My prayers were not like the ones I had spoken in the mosque, repeating memorized verses. Instead, they came from my heart, simple, honest words spoken in the silence of the safe house. Sometimes I prayed for the people who had been healed, asking God to protect them. Sometimes I prayed for the men who were angry, hoping their hearts would soften. Sometimes I prayed for the imam, wishing he could see the truth without fear. But most of all, I prayed for my family, that we would find a way to live without running forever. Each prayer felt like a small light in the darkness, guiding me forward even when the path was hidden. There were moments of deep sadness too. I missed my home in Taif, the sound of children playing in the street, the smell of my mother's cooking, the feel of warm afternoons when the sun touched the stones outside our door. I missed my old life, the one I didn't realize I loved until it was gone. But sadness did not erase hope. Somehow, even in the darkest moments, I felt a quiet strength rising inside me, reminding me that everything we lost was not the end of our story. Something new was growing, something I couldn't fully see but could feel in my heart. It was not the safety of my old life, but the promise of something brighter. Because of everything that happened, I want to speak to every Christian who hears my story. I want you to know that there are believers in places like Saudi Arabia who walk with faith even when their steps are hidden. Some cannot speak openly. Some must worship in secret. Some live in fear of being discovered. But their faith is strong, stronger than you may ever realize. They hold on to hope with hands that tremble, but do not let go. So I ask you, from the depths of my heart, to pray for them. Pray for courage. Pray for protection. Pray for wisdom. Pray that they will not feel alone. And pray that the light that reached me in my small room in Taif will reach others who are searching in silence. If you have freedom to speak the name of Jesus, do not take it for granted. If you can gather without fear, be thankful. If you can open a Bible without hiding, know that many wish they could do the same. Use your freedom to love others, to strengthen one another, to care for the weak, and to remember those who suffer quietly. Your prayers have more power than you realize, and your kindness can reach hearts far beyond what you can see. Now, as I tell this story from a place I cannot name, I do not know where my future will lead. My family is safe for now, but danger still exists, and we live each day with caution. There are moments when fear tries to rise inside me, whispering doubts and questions. But whenever I feel afraid, I remember the night when the light filled my room. I remember the warmth that touched my heart. I remember the voice that spoke without sound. And I remember the miracles that followed. These memories remind me that I am not alone, that Jesus did not reveal himself to abandon me, and that the light he placed inside me cannot be taken away by fear or darkness. I may be only a young girl from Taif, small, unknown, hidden from the world, but Jesus saw me. He called me, and he showed me that his love can reach even the quietest corners of the earth. So no matter what happens next, I know this: the light that entered my room will never leave me. It will guide me, protect me, and shine through me, even if I must remain unseen. And one day, when the time is right, the world will understand the truth of what happened. Not because of my strength, but because of the one who touched my heart with a love that cannot be denied.